Hey y'all, I am back with chapter 7 of Will Smith's autobiography, simply entitled Will. And I've really been paying attention to that fifth house lately, ever since reading chapter 6. So I will have to admit, chapter 6 was a bit better than 4 and 5. And I'm hopeful about chapter 7. But before we get into chapter 7, I just wanted to point out some things about Will Smith's fifth house and relate it to one of the passages in this book. So he says, I was 18, and this is from chapter 6. So I already read this, but I'm rereading it again just to point out how this lines up in his chart. So he says, I was 18. From the day I met her, Melanie had been the center of my life. Healing the pain of her trauma became my constant preoccupation. The look in Melanie's eyes became the substitute for Gigi's approval. I've always needed a woman to achieve for. When I performed, I was now performing for Melanie. When I started making money rapping, in my mind, I was making money for her. I bound my self-esteem to the sliding scale of her happiness. If she was happy, that meant I was a good person. If she was unhappy, that meant I was a monster. So he has that Virgo on the 5th, and Mercury, ruler of the 5th, is in Libra, and it's conjoined to Venus in Libra. So again, this is him saying, when I performed, it was for Melanie. When I started making money rapping, in my mind, it was making it for her. But again, like I said, you have to take these oppositions to Saturn into account, because that's telling you all you need to know about his hidden agenda. And I say hidden because that Saturn's in the 12th house. And this could be even largely unconscious on his part, at least when he was younger, where he was basically doing all this for himself, but making it seem like he's doing it for his girlfriend, Melanie. And I believe that's how he approaches most situations. But then also he says this part about, where is it at? If she was happy, it meant I was a good person. That's that Virgo influence upon the 5th house. But then he adds in there, if she was unhappy, that meant I was a monster. So that's where that Pluto is coming from. And that's kind of deep on his part, because it is showing that I guess he feels like, depending on his audience or whoever is in his life, he could be either or. He could come across as a good person or as a monster, which basically is showing that his personality is tenuous and it's dependent upon who he's around, you could kind of say. And that again can be Mercury ruling the 5th, being conjoined to Venus and opposing Saturn, because this hookup is also showing how he expresses himself. So it's showing with that Saturn and Aries in the 12th house, you never can be really sure of who Will Smith really is. And he may not be exactly sure of who he really is either, because it's all about the reaction he gets from others and the response that he's seeking from them. All right, so with that being said, let me just move on to this 7th chapter. Chapter 7, Adventure. If this book were a movie, we've now reached the montage scene where the music kicks in, For the Love of Money by the OGs, and everything goes great. Our hero can't miss. He's on the come up. Every shot goes in. Every kiss burns with passion of 1,000 suns. He can't get to the bank fast enough to cash all the checks. His name dances off the lips and rings in the ears of the high and the mighty. No longer emblazoned on the side of his pants, his moniker now bounces off his chest in 24-karat herringbone gold littered with ethically sourced diamonds. No, he didn't say ethically sourced diamonds. Oh my God, just stop, Will. Do you see how he tries to come across as this do-gooder type of character? And again, makes you question that opposition, because is that really who he is? It became clear in this year that he was never going to college. Our debut album, Rock the House, led by Girls Ain't Nothing But Trouble as the first single, and now plugged into the international distribution center of Jive Records, ended up going gold, selling more than 500,000 copies, and would eventually reach number 83 on the Billboard 200 chart. And while that wasn't necessarily considered earth-shattering at the time, Cinderella had made it to the ball. Do you see what I mean about y'all have to read between the lines? Let me just repeat this. And while that wasn't necessarily considered earth-shattering at the time, Cinderella had made it to the ball. So Will Smith is describing himself as Cinderella, when Cinderella is a girl character from a Disney story. Interesting, very interesting. And the more I look at that opposition between Venus and Mercury and his Saturn, I'm starting to wonder if this is a cross-dressing aspect for him. And he did, wasn't it in the Wild Wild West movie that he did cross-dress? I think he put on like a wedding dress or something like that. Now, I never saw that movie, but I do remember some people talking about that, like how he had to go through the ritual. Speaking of ritual, that Jupiter conjoined Pluto could deal with being part of, those rituals, those sex rituals. But more about that in a minute. But this is interesting how he likened himself to Cinderella. Now, I don't want to be the old guy at the end of the bar yapping about how much better music was in his day, how these kids don't know nothing about real rap. There's actually brain science that theorizes that the songs you hear in your teenage years become embronzed in your emotional memory, heightening their nostalgic power beyond any other period in your life. That's not what's happening here. I get that's what happens with other people, but this is not some dopamine-induced opinion, blinkered by wistful memories of a fairy tale adolescence. No, what I'm saying is objectively and factually true. The late 1980s was the greatest time in hip hop history, period. Full stop, amen. Please be seated. Allow me to make my case. From the moment Jeff and I stepped on that tour bus in late 1986 through summer 1988, we performed nearly 200 shows. And I would like to list just a few of the hip hop icons with whom we shared a stage. Imagine this in my trying not to be an asshole voice. Run DMC, LL Cool J, Houdini, Public Enemy, Two Live Crew, Salt and Pepper, Eric B. and Rakim, NWA, EPMD, UTFO, JJ Fad, Beastie Boys, The Ghetto Boys, Heavy D and the Boys, Sir Mix-a-Lot, Kid and Play, MC Lyte, Queen Latifah, Grandmaster Flash, Ice-T, Mantronics and Just Ice, Eazy-E, Too Short, MC Hammer, Dougie Fresh and Slick Rick, Big Daddy Kane, Biz Markie, Roxanne Shante, MC Shannon, the whole Juice Crew, A Tribe Called Quest, Leaders of the New School, Naughty by Nature. Shall I continue or are we good? This was one of the greatest periods of my life. Everything was new. We were defining the culture. We were a part of the wave, the tsunami that was carrying hip hop across the globe. Every artist was unique. Something happened every show that was a first in hip hop. We were playing in front of crowds where sometimes 50% of the audience had never seen someone rap before. They were in awe. There was an intoxicating energy of discovery and adventure. This was a time in my life rich with first encounters and mind-expanding new experiences. The executive who ran our account at Jive was a Japanese woman named Ann Carley. At first, Jeff and I were a little confused at how she was going to direct our careers, and then she spoke. She had been at the heart of the initial burst of hip hop in New York City. She fed Jeff and me a global diet of the world's hip hop colorings. I could feel my spirit of adventure awakening. I discovered the vital importance of travel. It lends critical perspective. Things that had been debilitating problems in my mind on the streets of West Philly barely existed in a rodeo arena in Omaha, Nebraska. I made a promise to myself that I would eat anything that the locals ate. I've even eaten blackened alligator, sea slugs, camel, and chocolate-covered crickets. Everything tastes like chicken. It doesn't. I just always wanted to say that. I wanted to see and do everything. On the back of the moderate but solid success of Rock the House, Jive Records was eager for us to record a follow-up album as soon as possible. In the fall of 1987, our first ever trip out of the United States was scheduled, 6 weeks in London, where Jive was headquartered, to record in their company studios. But 2 weeks prior to our departure date, JL called me with that 1 a.m. phone call where even the tone of the ring makes your heart jump. Jeff was in a car accident, he said. Disoriented, I responded, "What happened? Where is he? Is he cool?" "I don't know. I'm going to the hospital. I'll hit you back." Back then, there were no texts, no reaching people in their cars, no minute-to-minute reports on how your loved ones were doing. You just made sure everybody stayed off the landline. You kept checking the phone for a dial tone, and you waited. And the longer you waited, the more graphic and disturbing the pictures your mind painted, until you were absolutely certain that you'd never see them again. At about 3:15 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, the ring was louder than it should have been, like it was ringing at me instead of for me. I answered, "Yo, he's cool," JL said. "His right leg is broken, and he has a cast from his hip to his ankle. Other than that, he's fine. But the doctor said he shouldn't fly. We need to postpone the trip for about 8 weeks." In the background, I heard Jeff scream out, "I don't give a fuck what the doctor said. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be on a plane to London." And true to his determined spirit, 2 weeks later, we were checking into the Holiday Inn Swiss Cottage. It was me and Charlie in one tiny cramped-ass hotel room, and JL, Ready Rock, and Jeff and his full-length cast in another. Just 5 Philly kids, dreary English days and dank English nights, but a private recording studio set aside just for us on Jive's dime. We spent more than a month in London, and I couldn't have told you a single thing about the city. We didn't walk through Hyde Park or visit Westminster Abbey. We didn't see Buckingham Palace or climb the Tower of London. We didn't sit in a 1,000-year-old pub and eat fish and chips. We sure as hell didn't go to no soccer match. We never even adjusted from our jet lag. We woke up at 4 p.m. every day, hit the studio by 6 p.m., worked until about 6 a.m., grabbed some free breakfast from the Switch Cottage buffet, and went to bed around 7 a.m. We kept that schedule up for almost 6 weeks, and it was bliss. Well, except for one night that Jeff decided he wanted his cast taken off. His 6-week appointment to have it removed fell while we were still in London, and his leg was starting to itch. But he didn't trust Britain's National Health Service to take it off. He was more comfortable if me and Charlie Mack did it. As a general rule, if someone asked me if I could do something, the answer is always yes, a delusional trait that both Charlie Mack and I share wholeheartedly. Again, that's that opposition. As a general rule, if someone asked me if I could do something, the answer is always yes, a delusional, keyword delusional, that both Charlie Mack and I share wholeheartedly. So that's Mercury conjoined to Venus in Libra, opposing Saturn in Aries. It's a cast, I'm saying. It's just a cast. Let's just take it off, Charlie said indifferently. I too felt confident in the basic simplicity of the operation. It was just a cast. I called room service and requested a steak knife. Little did I know that British hotels didn't carry steak knives. This would make the process of cutting a piece of steak far too easy for them. Undeterred, I said, "Well, you could send up dirty butter knives, please." The Swiss Cottage butter knives had a tiny serrated edge at the tip, which suggests that they weren't actually butter knives. My plan was I would give Charlie 15 knives and he would begin cutting at Jeff's ankle. And I would take 15 knives and start cutting at Jeff's hip. I feel like this is one of the yarns he's spinning about the dirty knives. This seems a bit far-fetched. The way the math played out in my mind, by the time we worn out the serrated edges of the butter knives, we should have met at Jeff's knee for a quick high five celebration before making the last ceremonial cut. I had a vague memory that this too ended, meet in the middle process was successfully employed in the building of the Panama Canal and equally in the construction of the United States railroad system. Wow. The cutting began, or the lack thereof. Butter knife after butter knife bent and fell as confusion grew into frustration on Charlie's sweet, moistened face. Yo, these knives ain't doing shit, he said. Okay, let me just stop right here. Now, I guess this story was very adventurous and interesting to Will, but this is what I mean about the extra details that are non-essential and that really makes this book longer than what it has to be. Why do we need to know the process of them like going through cutting off the cast? I mean, I'm just saying, maybe I'm the only one that's like kind of exasperated by his long-windedness, especially in terms of these details that make no difference to me. And I don't think this is quite exciting or even amusing. Reading on, I was 12 years old the last time I had a cast, and at that time, they were made of plaster of Paris. Apparently, cast science had advanced since then, and Jeff's was made out of some new alien material that I later learned was fiberglass. About 6 knives in, I called a halt. Undeterred, I suggested that Jeff get into the bathtub. We'd make the water as hot as he could take it, thereby softening this puppy up. I assured Jeff it would come right off. He agreed. Me and Charlie helped Jeff into the bathtub, both legs fully submerged, and then we waited. Pretty soon, a lot of concern washed over Jeff's face. So I guess Jeff is naked in front of them. I mean, I'm not implying anything, but again, I feel like Will wants us to read between the lines with this. It's like he's basically revealing certain details without openly acknowledging it, if you get what I'm saying. Because I'm like, why else do we need to go through this long, drawn out process of him and his friend trying to cut off his cast? Again, non-essential in terms of what people are really looking to gain from reading this book, in my opinion. So let me just go back. Me and Charlie helped Jeff into the bathtub, both legs fully submerged, and then he waited. Pretty soon, a look of concern washed over Jeff's face. Yo, man, y'all need to get this shit off. It's tightening up, Jeff said. I remember thinking, what would MacGyver do? MacGyver was a hit 1980s TV show where the lead character, Angus MacGyver, would get into all kinds of predicaments, only to come up with some ingenious solution. As I was attempting to channel my inner Mac, I heard the door to the hotel room open. A few seconds later, JL pokes his head into the bathroom. By this point, Jeff is squirming and moaning in the bathtub, while Charlie Mack and I are on our knees, holding 2 butter knives with 28 others scattered all over the bathroom floor. JL takes a long pause, presumably trying to puzzle out what he's seeing. Stumped, he shouts, "What the fuck are y'all doing?" JL, Jeff squealed. You got to get this shit off my leg. Why are you in the tub? JL had spent the previous 2 years working at a hospital. So while it was not his expertise, either he at least knew that you don't soak a fiberglass cast in hot water while it's still on somebody's leg. You can't get that cast wet like that. Just get it off, y'all, Jeff wailed. Stop bitching, man. It can't be that bad, Charlie said. Get him out of the goddamn tub, JL barked. You don't need to be yelling at him, JL. That don't help shit, Charlie snapped back. Me and Charlie got Jeff out of the tub as instructed and laid him on the bathroom floor. We had been keeping canned goods in our hotel rooms because Swiss cottage room service wasn't all it could have been. JL immediately went over and opened a can of beef stew. With the jagged edge of the aluminum lid, he came over to Jeff's cast. And whereas Charlie and I had been trying to cut vertically up and down the cast, JL made gentle horizontal moves across the cast. And like Grant through Richmond, in less than 90 seconds, he had made a full-length incision, which Charlie and I were able to easily pry fully open. Jeff was free. Angrily, JL threw the top of the beef stew can into the trash. And as he exited, he grumbled, "Y'all are as stupid as shit." In medical scenarios, we may have been dumb and dumber, but in the studio, we were fire. Those recording sessions were probably the purest creative experiences I have ever had in my career. We recorded so many songs, and the record company loved so many of them that they decided to attempt something that they had never been tried in the world of rap. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince would release hip hop's first double album. Jeff and I had no concept of what this album was going to do, whether it was something fans would want to hear, whether MTV would like it, whether radio stations would play it, whether hip hop heads would diss it. None of this crossed our minds. All we cared about was that we were inspired and inflamed by the creative process. We were having fun. We were best friends at the center of our new family, and we were on the cutting edge of a burgeoning global art form. We were riding high, but in hindsight, imperceptible seeds of impending discontent were being shown. Some people thrive at high altitudes, but others can't breathe. And what do people do when they climb a mountain and realize the air is too thin? They try to get back down as fast as possible. Quincy Jones called it altitude sickness. In high school, Ready Rock and I had been best friends. We would ride around every single day, battling and creating. We were inseparable. But as DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince began to take shape, human beatboxing was becoming less and less of a core art form within our group. The record company was also not interested in songs featuring human beatboxing. The result was that Clay was being pushed to the fringes of our new family. I was telling him not to worry. I got you, I said. In hindsight, it was too much change too fast, and the experience demanded emotional maturity that was far beyond what any of us possessed. And to make matters even more painful and complicated, Charlie Mack and I were becoming locked at the hip. We weren't just sharing a hotel room together, we were sharing every aspect of our lives. Interesting. There's even a song on the album celebrating my relationship with Charlie. What did I tell y'all? That Sagittarius on the 7th with Jupiter conjoined Pluto in Virgo. He gets in relationships with people he works with. Intimate relationships, sexual relationships with Jupiter being conjoined to Pluto. Interesting. That also speaks to that Capricorn on the 8th with Saturn and Aries. So is he revealing here that he was in a relationship, a romantic relationship, sexual relationship with Charlie Mack? Again, you got to read between the lines with this book. I'm going to reread this part. And to make matters even more painful and complicated, Charlie Mack and I were becoming locked at the hip. The hip, Sagittarius on the 7th, Sagittarius rules the hips. We weren't just sharing a hotel room together. We were sharing every aspect of our lives. There's even a song on the album celebrating my relationship with Charlie Mack, the first out the limo. The song developed from Charlie overdoing his security job. That's very Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Virgo. He would sit in front of the limo with the driver, and he would be pissed if me or Jeff got out before he did. He would bark, "God damn, y'all, let me secure the perimeter before y'all step out." There are no songs on the album about Ready Rock. Guess him and Ready Rock just didn't have that chemistry. From 1987 until 1990, I did not step outside without Charlie Mack with me. Whereas Jeff and JL were quiet, introspective homebodies, Charlie and I were loud, raucous, center of attention party starters. We were always looking for something to get ourselves into. We both loved to party. We loved to talk. We loved traveling and gambling and fast cars, and women loved us. Charlie not only matched, but also challenged my adventurous spirit. This joker never wanted to sleep. So him looking for a match for his adventurous spirit, that's that Sagittarius on the 7th. And again, with Jupiter conjoined Pluto and Virgo, that could be him sexing somebody he works with. This joker never wanted to sleep. Sagittarius on the 7th. Sagittarius is the insomniac. If we were only in the town for 10 hours, he didn't see any reason to spend a single minute in the hotel room. Many a day, he literally dragged me out of bed to go to Paisley Park in Minneapolis, or to go hear a speech given by some activist in Chicago, or demand that we take a picture on the strip, which is what Charlie calls the Champs-Élysées in Paris. Come on, man, he'd say. You get to sleep all you want when you're dead. The other part of our chemistry, that word, was that Charlie and I both incredibly competitive and absolutely delusional in our high self-regard. We spent entire days arguing about who could run faster, who's a better driver, who could throw a football farther, who was more handsome, who was funnier, who was smarter, and most of all, which one girls liked more. Charlie absolutely hated it when a woman walked past him to flirt with me. Oh, shit. Will is being very revealing in this chapter. Here it goes, y'all. I think it's about to get real spicy from here on out. Let me just reread that last sentence. Charlie absolutely hated it when a woman walked past him to flirt with me. He could not figure out why a woman would want to waste time with me if she could have him. Now that's the part he tries to clean it up with. He finally begrudgingly concluded, man, the only reason girls want to get with you is because you're famous. To which I replied, nah, Charlie, you got it backward. I'm famous because all the girls want to get with me. We were the yin to each other's yang. You know, yang means penis. We were the yin to each other's yang. We filled in the gaps to each other's life experience. We saw each other's blind spots and augmented each other's deficiency. Charlie, like Daddy-O, has sharp streetwise instincts. He used to call it his ghetto radar. So he's likening Charlie to like his father in some ways. Interesting. Charlie just knew when something bad was about to happen. We'd be out somewhere, everything would be going great, and out of nowhere, Charlie would whisper in my ear, let's go. I'd be like, what? Yo, we just got here. And then more forcibly, get up right now. I said, let's go. That makes me think of that Aries energy. I remember thinking that Charlie Mack was the human equivalent of an overly sensitive smoke alarm that keeps going off at 2 a.m. when there's no fire. And because it's a smoke alarm, you can't ignore it, because one day they may actually be flames. But Charlie Mack was an infallible, perfectly calibrated hood smoke alarm. Every single time I'd be grumbling in the parking lot as the sound of gunshots rang out from the party we just left. We compensated for each other's weaknesses. Charlie knew the streets, and I understood broader emotional patterns. I was book smart and mainstream friendly, whereas Charlie's physical appearance was scary and intimidating. And I think that turned Will on. That's that Jupiter conjunct Pluto, with Jupiter ruling that 7th house. I knew how to smile, make people feel safe, and get us in anywhere. Both of us were wildly deficient, but together we made one really capable person. I was Charlie's ticket into rooms into which he would never have been invited, those sex party rooms. And Charlie was the hammer that came down on anybody who dared to talk shit about me. He emboldened me to defend myself physically. Around this time, the chorus of criticism that I was corny and soft was beginning to rise. I didn't curse. I rapped about my high school experiences. I used a lot of humor. The shit talking was that I wasn't a real MC, or the worst, that I wasn't black enough and my music wasn't real hip hop. Just punch the motherfuckers in the face, Charlie would say. He won't say that shit next time. So with him having my back, I started doing exactly that. If somebody talked shit, I punched them in the face, and then he'd jump behind Charlie. Okay, Will. He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper was released on March 29th, 1988, anchored by Brand New Funk and Parents Just Don't Understand. The album would eventually reach number 4 on the Billboard 200, going triple platinum, selling more than 3 million copies. What was so groundbreaking about the record was that half was a DJ Center tour de force, a scratch album in which Jeff absolutely massacred the Wills of Steel, and the other half was the rapper side, where I was allowed to let the hyper-creative poetic playfulness of my 19-year-old mind run wild. Then the unimaginable happened. It was announced that the 31st Annual Grammy Awards would be the first to include a rap category. And Parents Just Don't Understand was nominated alongside Salt and Pepper's Push It, Going Back to Cali by LL Cool J, Kool Moe Dee's Wild Wild West, and Supersonic by JJ Fad. This was the first time I ever saw Jeff cry. I was excited beyond anything I'd ever experienced, but I'm not an accomplished crier. I wasn't mature enough to ask back then, but I always wanted to know exactly what part of it was so emotional for Jeff. Was he thinking about his cancer as a child? Was it his mother and his musical family who had been reaching for this for so many years, and he was the one bringing this honor? Was he scared? Did he realize there was no going back, that his old life was gone forever, and that the bar was now set so high? Charlie Mack, who had recently joined the Nation of Islam, said, "This the will of God. Y'all align with the will of God. You won. I'm telling you, you won. None of them records gonna beat your record. What God ordains, no man contains." Charlie Mack had been speaking in spiritual rhymes for a few months now. That Sagittarius on the 7th can deal with. He gets with somebody that does become very spiritual, where they're very religious, or where religion and spirituality is just a major theme in his relationships. Charlie Mack had been speaking in spiritual rhymes for a few months now, but in pure Charlie Mack form, on February 22nd, 1989, Bobby McFerrin won Record of the Year for Don't Worry, Be Happy. Album of the Year was George Michael's Faith. Tracy Chapman won Best New Artist, and the winner for Best Rap Performance was DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince for Parents Just Don't Understand, making us the first rappers ever to receive a Grammy Award. Wonder who he had to suck off to get that award. We ultimately ended up boycotting the actual ceremony because NARAS, the Grammy committee, refused to televise the presentation of the Rap Award. We felt that that was a slap in the face. Rap music had outsold the industry that year. We deserved to be there. Russell Simmons and Lear Cohen organized the boycott for Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Don't believe none of this stuff is grassroots, y'all. All this stuff is pre-orchestrated. It's all part of a certain agenda. They're all the evils that be, they're always trying to push forward some agendas. So once I'm reading Russell Simmons and Lear Cohen organized it, I already know this was already pre-planned. They organized the boycott for Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, along with Salt and Pepper, Ice-T, Public Enemy, Dougie Fresh, Slick Rick, Stetsasonic, and many others. And even though we weren't at the Grammys, Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince were everywhere else. Life changed forever. Well, almost. Jeff's mom planned a celebration dinner for Jeff and me in our first American Music Award. We showed up on the block as returning hometown heroes. People were coming out of their houses to cheer and applaud and shake our hands. It took us 20 minutes to get into Jeff's mom's house. When we finally made it, she threw her arms around us, gushing pride and joy. Then she handed Jeff $5 and a shopping list. "Jeffrey, I want you to go to the corner and get some bread, some baking soda, and see if they got some yams that come in a can." "But Mom," Jeff started. "But nothing, boy. Go get that stuff I told you to get." So DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince had to walk through our adoring fans up to Looney's. They didn't have the yams. Russell Simmons was orchestrating the global destruction of all barriers to hip hop, and me and Jeff were one of his battering rams. We were the clean group, the respectable group for Russell. We were the perfect weapon against all naysayers. We were at the tip of the spear. We launched Yo MTV Raps, blasting hip hop into daytime television. When the Four Seasons hotels would not allow rap artists to stay during their tours, Russell convinced them to allow DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, opening the doors for future hip hop artists to use the chain. Daytime radio was terrified to put rappers on live, so they always forced rappers to pre-record interviews to make sure we didn't say anything crazy. Me and Jeff were among the first wave to be allowed to speak live on the radio during the day. Our shows were getting bigger. The crowds were getting louder. One night in Detroit at the Joe Louis Arena, I got overexcited and forgot the words to Parents Just Don't Understand. This had never happened to me before. My heart dropped into my stomach. There are a few things more embarrassing than forgetting the words to one of the songs that 18,000 people spent their hard-earned money to come and hear. But something miraculous happened. The entire crowd began to sing the lyrics back to me. Every person knew every word. I held the mic out to the crowd and they finished the song. It took everything I had not to burst into tears. Thousands of people saying my words back to me. I felt loved, protected, and cradled by a crowd of strangers. We were red hot and unstoppable. At 20 years old, I was a world famous rapper, a Grammy Award winner, and freshly minted millionaire, pun intended. I would drop the mic, but I needed for the next chapter. For months, Gigi had been saving up to move to a 16th floor apartment overlooking the main line. It was a beautiful building set up for senior-friendly living. Her house on North 54th Street had become a burden for her, too many stairs, and generally inconvenient for her advancing years. With my first money, I surprised Gigi with the apartment she'd been saving up for. She had thought we were just going to look at it, but then the real estate agent handed her the keys. "Lover boy," she said with a gasp, "how'd you do this?" "Well, Gigi, see, there's this thing called rap music," I said, putting my arms around her. Melanie and I moved into Gigi's old house on North 54th Street. My childhood home was now our new home. I had promised Melanie that I would take care of her. And here I was, providing the first safe home of her short life. Now, it seemed like he was gushing more over Charlie Mack than Melanie. Again, it always seems like Melanie is an afterthought. "I'd won," he said. "All of my dreams were blossoming into vivid THX sound and technicolor. I had conquered life." And that concludes chapter 7. I'm going hard on these chapters because I want to get past chapter 10 before this month is out. So hope y'all are enjoying these chapters. It's starting to get juicy, y'all. I was having my doubts, but this past chapter, especially when he was talking about Charlie Mack and his relationship, really was an eye opener for me, especially if you are reading between the lines. Oh, that's my belly. I'm hungry. I don't know if y'all heard that, but my stomach is growling. Time for me to grab some lunch, but I will be back with chapter 8 very soon. Let me see what chapter 8 is called. Oh, there's some pictures after that. Chapter 8 is entitled Pain. So this should be interesting. But just to reiterate what I was saying, when he was all gushing over Charlie Mack, that was very much him talking about that Sagittarius on the 7th. And Charlie Mack is a big dude. And, you know, the signs on the houses, they can deal with a variety of things. There could be a number of manifestations. So one of the manifestations of Sagittarius on the 7th house cuts is to get with somebody that's rather large in stature, like Charlie Mack. And then when you look at Jupiter, it's in the house of love and romance, that 5th house. And Jupiter's in Virgo could join a Pluto. That is like the epitome of his bodyguard. So to me, that's telling me that Will is revealing to those who are clever, and you don't really even have to be that clever to be able to read between the lines with this. I feel like, yeah, that's basically him admitting that he had a romantic relationship with Charlie Mack. I believe he also had a romantic relationship with Jazzy Jeff, but that didn't last long, perhaps because it looked like he chose Charlie over Jeff. And I had my suspicions about Charlie in chapter 6 when he was describing him. So this is very telling. Let me know what y'all think in the chat. Again, I will be back with chapter 8, which is called Pain. And please like and share. Also, subscribe if you're new to this channel. And if you need a reading, just go to my website. The web address is listed in the description section. Peace.